Hello and welcome to episode 73 of The Imperial Truth. As ever, I am Greg.
And I'm Neil.
How you doing, Neil?
Yeah, good. How are you, Greg?
Yeah, mustn't grumble at all. We'll do the usual stuff first. Element games for all your plastic toy needs and your modelling needs and everything else. And at some point in November, your Necromunda needs as well. Pretty sure. So go there and
I can see that being big.
It's going to be big. It's going to be very big. Go and get your Blood Bowl, your Necromunda, your Heresy, your Space Marines, your whatever you're playing at the moment from them, and use the link in the show notes or on the Twitter feeds, or go through the banner on imperialtruth.com.
Yes, and I will quickly go over Lil Legend Studios, and we've said it lots of times before, but Miles is brilliant at, if you need something painted, if you want to learn how to paint something, then definitely give him a look, and go and check out all of his Instagram, his Facebooks, his Twitter, his pretty much everything he's got going on, and check out what he's up to at the moment.
Check out Patreon, because it's gone up another few levels. So I think he's at that point now where you're just getting more for your money. I could be wrong. I haven't checked it out, kind of what level he's at, but there's lots of content on there. It looks to be pretty successful for him, which is awesome. And he can crack on until those Blood Angels come out and ruin his wallet.
Yes, indeed they will.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. What are you working on tonight, Neil?
Nothing much. I've done a bit on Corax. I've got the base to get done on Corax now, which is going to be mainly a bit of dry brushing and a bit of pigments and stuff, but I never quite know which way a base is going to go until I sort of get halfway through it. So I usually just sort of throw a load of colours down and then start working it up or down from there. So yeah, bit of fun times with the base at the moment.
Cool. Sounds fun.
Yes. Well, bases aren't, well, they can make or break a model, can't they, really?
Yeah,
but I find them one of the least inspiring bits to do, usually on a Primarch model.
Yeah, that's the problem. But yeah, they got to be done, and as you say, they can really enhance a model, but they don't always seem that way.
Yes, yeah, definitely not. How about you? What have you been up to?
Finally got all the blue done on my knights, so I've got 5 knights here now that need to be everything else done onto them, and after some conversations today we're recording this Sunday night, just finishing off the episode on the Sunday night of the open day, talking to some people, it's like I might actually buy another light and do some painting at work, because there's a lot of time there where I can do it. I'm lucky enough to have a situation where I can do some, but I need to make sure the setup's right to do it. But we'll see how that goes. As long as I can have Netflix on in the background or a podcast or whatever, it should be fine.
Yeah, definitely, that sounds good.
Yeah, I just need to kind of really crack on with it now, because there's a lot of stuff to get painted and lots more to come. Looking at the Mastodon again today, that's a long way down the line, shall we say. But yeah,
there's always something else you could buy and paint.
There's so much, always. Yeah, there's absolutely so much. But such is life. So yes, there's a lot of silver and blue knightage sitting around my painting desk, waiting to be sorted out before I buy another one, which I will have to do in the end, I think, just to fill the army out. So we'll get on that.
Wonderful.
Might give them some allies maybe to kind of buff the army out a little bit in the interim, but we shall have to we'll just see how I go doing those guys. Should we quickly do the one item that was released by Forge World that was for us?
Yep.
The Arca Strike tank, the Legion Sicaran. So this was the second of the third variants. The third variant was available today, pre-release. Sorry, I won't be surprised if that's out fairly soon. The big laser, whatever it is, plasma cannon gun things.
Yes.
But the Arcus is out, and it's a Mechanicum killer. It has potential to be quite. It's a Sicaran, so it's going to move quick. It's only 24-inch range, but it's instant death on its guns with a few shots.
Yeah, see, I think that's interesting, because we never seem to have a lot of instant death, so it's interesting when a weapon comes along that can dish some of it out.
Yeah, and the fact it's on a tank means you can manoeuvre it a little bit better than you can otherwise. Hide
Yeah,
it.
because I suppose how many instant death things do you get on vehicles, really? Because it's mainly like character weapons, isn't it, usually?
Yeah, there's not a lot there. So that's got potential. You never know. If we start seeing a lot of them come up, you might see Mechanicum kind of disappear a little bit. But what's it called? Neutron Flux. And that's on the warhead. So you have to buy those warheads for it. And you can have, let me just have a little look while I do it. May take any of the following. So you can pay for all of them, which is, I mean, these are experimental rules, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're fairly close to what comes out in the end. It's not cheap.
They usually are, aren't they?
Yeah, so it's 205 points for the tank itself and 30 points for the flux warheads. So, and that's just as it is base. So that's, you're not getting anything extra cool on that, which maybe you don't want. But, I mean, you can load it up with other warheads to mix it up because it says it can take any of the following. So you can have the different ones on there. Things like terminal tracking for re-rolling, successful jink and cover saves, things like that, which is quite good on a Strength 8 AP2 launcher. No interceptor on that one, but a Strength 7 AP3 one with intercept and Skyfire. But, yeah, there's a wide range of possibilities there, but yeah, if you have a regular a mechanical opponent, he's not going to be happy if you've got many of these things sitting there doing that. It is, I believe, a heavy support option, just off the top of my head, which is quite good. Yeah, it's a heavy support choice, which means it doesn't fit in some of the, I don't think the Emperor's Children can use it for their outflanking then. For their right of war. I think that has to be fast attack and stuff. I don't think heavies can do it, which is good because you don't want this coming on right on the edge of your army and just going, oh yeah, I've just killed that unit of 5 Caslax or whatever. It would be pretty harsh. But it's an interesting option. It's kind of good to see how it plays out and go from there. See, you never know. People might not. It might not be long range enough. It might be. And it might not come into play enough. Although, instant deathing Terminators and things, I didn't see the AP on it, to be fair. I've just closed the page, but there's other stuff that can be instant death. So.
Yeah, and instant death is so rare that it obviously gives people an option there, doesn't it? Especially if you play a lot of Mechanicum, you've certainly got an option now, haven't you?
Yeah, very good option as well. So, yeah, if they're bringing all the Caslax, then they're going to maybe struggle. But then it's only Sakaran, so it's not the hardest thing in the world to kill.
Yeah, I usually used to find that the Sakarans, although often they were quite useful on the board, they would be the first thing that I'd usually go for to take out because they could deal out a lot of damage, but they couldn't take a lot. So if you focused on them, they would buckle and go. So it was an easy way of reducing your enemy's firepower, take out the Sakaran early doors, and then it's that's not quite as scary then.
Yeah, the one thing you can do with the Sakaran generally is hide it quite well. So, but because they're not huge, but that's by the by really. You have to play around it. You have to do what you can. So, it's all fun. All fun. So yes, as I was saying, I was at the open day. And we had some new releases.
Hooray!
These were all, everyone knows about these, but we got what we got. We got the Flyer, the Custodian Orion gunship thing. I can't remember the name of it. The Orion, £275 for a decent chunk of resin. It's, a lot of interesting views on it, but I really like it. And having seen it in the flesh, I really like it even more.
Do you know, seeing some people put some photos up on Instagram and bits of people, I thought it looked so much better. Because you sometimes get that one arbitrary shot, don't you, from from a preview, and you get tons of people sort of say how they don't like it or they don't like how it looks. But seeing it in some different poses and seeing it next to some other Custodes vehicles as well, you can see how it really does sort of match in nicely.
Oh, absolutely. The kind of the engines are pretty much the same style as those other hovers. The kind of the engine ports at the back are really cool, in my opinion. And yeah, as you say, when you get more than one picture, your mind can automatically build more of a 3D image of that thing. It's not perfect, but it can do it. I think it's fantastic, and it's a decent chunk of it. It's £275, but it's where the Mastodon seems to have a lot of that in the walls and stuff. I don't know if this feels like it's got a little bit more resin in it than the Mastodon. It probably hasn't, but it does feel like that.
Did you see some of the internal details?
I looked in the back, yeah. I'm not bothered because I won't paint them. So
I know. Yeah. That's true. I mean, I think I saw someone building one on Instagram.
Sure.
And he was photographing all the inside detail, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and
really.
I mean, the thing with that is, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that is kind of almost sat on the computer, like ready to go. Because there's only a lot of it's block shapes for starters.
Yes.
So you can pull that in quite easily when you're working in a CAD. I think it's fantastic. And put it this way, the guy I went with was like, I was considering one, and then kind of saw them and showed his mate them, and his mate went, oh yeah, I'll have one. And so they bought one each. He's taking it home.
Actually, out of stock, or like that pre-order where it comes to you?
No, got them. They still had.
Oh, they got them.
They still had plenty of stock of them left, I believe. Although I think Howard might have been told he could only have two because they didn't have stock. But I wonder if that was because they were worried that he was selling them on eBay or something. But
could be.
Yeah, there were quite a few of them. And as I say, we had the Amiga tank destroyer on sale as well, which we've all seen, and still not 100% sure on the length of the guns, but I think it looks cool.
I think it looks awesome.
Yeah. And then we've seen they actually pre-showed some of this stuff on Warhammer TV. Tony was on there.
Did they?
Yeah, Tony was on there on Thursday, being Tony. It was quite good, actually, with Rob. Rob and him were bouncing off each other. And they showed, like, this stuff. So they showed the Prosecutor upgrade set for the Sisters of Silence, which are cool, but they're kind of just putting pistols on the plastic models. Not all of the plastic models are necessarily in the right shape to be looking like utilising those pistols. But I think they've done
like the body shapes are
a
bit maybe.
I think they've done quite a good job of what they were given. For a very quick upgrade, it's quite cool. And then we had the Thousand Sons Legion Praetor, which is not it's not starting a series of each legion getting their Praetor, but it's like it was one of the original concepts for the Terminators, which then got pulled a different way. So they've utilised an already designed model for that, which I think's sensible and cool to do.
Cool.
And then the Legis Custodes Aquilon Terminators and the Terminators with the Infernus Fire Pikes as well, which are going to be hell if you're in a hot or you're putting them under pressure in a carrying case, because they are long and thin.
They're going to be bendy and snappy, is that what you're saying?
They're going to certainly droop, I think, if they're in a too hot an environment, or the pressure on them from like the foam in bags sometimes can do. But they're fantastic. These are big models, £50 for three basically, but they are big models, very cool. And there was, there's been some interesting reaction to the amount of custodian stuff's coming out, and where are the wolves and things like that. But there's been some delays with the wolves. We only saw one. We actually saw a picture, put it up on the Twitter feed, of one of the Vanguard Terminators. But they've had a problem with their printer. I think it's delayed a lot of stuff getting onto show.
Right.
Yeah.
So was he part of the unit then, was he?
He is apparently the sculptor's least favourite one of the unit. Putting that in bunny ears, that's a quote I heard. But yeah, he is one of the unit.
Okay, cool.
And I really like it. And again, I've seen some very mixed reactions to it, but I really like it. I think it's an awesome model.
Yeah, I thought it looked really good, and it was difficult to sort of, the detail looked quite large, but then sometimes that can be like how the photographs come out, and
yeah, and I kind of want to see it with all the others as well, because it's very easy to judge one model very differently.
Yes, definitely.
But I say I really liked it. Some people will probably say, "Well, you will," but
Space Wolves are new. I think it's going to be
I think
it's going to be an unfair fight.
There's a bit of wolf fur in there. I'm sure some people won't like that, and maybe the helmetless head, but the knot works in there as well. I mean, part of me wonders what other people are expecting a little bit. Hey ho, such is life. But it was But that's
some people are never happy.
No. So I can expect the stuff that was on sale. I'll probably expect over the next couple of weeks. Personally, that's an assumption I'm going to make. The Space will seem to be a few months off. Tony said that himself on the Warhammer TV. But they didn't. It was a really interesting show, actually, and I won't go into it too much because we talked about these shows before. Forge World side of things, they had a number of people weren't there. So Mark Bedford, Phil S, the no rules writers there on the Heresy side of things. So it was like Will Hayes and Sam were there and a few others. But it did seem to be lacking a little bit in that, and I don't know whether that's bad timing of holidays or what have you. I can only guess those things going on. But I went in to go, who do I talk to about rules, Andy Hawes sat the other side, but he's specialist games guy now, and he's still got things back, and Tony's walking around, and I never get anything out of Tony anyway. He tells other people
more
you get
stuff. Nothing out of Tony.
Well, no, other people seem to, but I don't. So I wasn't really too worried. I was up there, kind of looking around, and Necromunda was announced, and we'll be dealing with that on Fnatic, but that looks fantastic, and obviously that was a big buzz right there. And that Chaos Dragon's almost complete as well, potentially. So there were those kind of things, and I was with my missus, and she was very keen on Smaug, which actually is quite an old model now, Smaug. But
it is. How long has that been out for now?
A number of years, but boy, does that still stand up. Really
definitely. It's a massive piece, isn't it?
I was trying to work out how old it was, and I'm like, it's £275, I think. And I remember because it was the first big kit like that really came out, wasn't it? That wasn't a big tank. And
yes.
And it was like, wow. And I'm looking at it now going, you know what? If you sculpted it now, it wouldn't look much different.
Well, I mean, I suppose it being based off what the movie IP is, I suppose it's always got to look a certain way, but it was always quite an impressive, because it came under the GW banner, didn't it, originally?
Yeah, because that was it was Lord of the Rings was GW game. Yeah, it has to meet with New Line Cinema's kind of approval, really.
Completely,
because they owned the visual rights for that. But they smashed it. It just reminded me how good a model that is. Unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to paint it that well. Otherwise, I think we'd consider buying one and putting it on the shelf. But such is life. But things like Holly was there. Holly Goodwin with her book of amazing pictures, and the only new thing was the logo for Necromunda. And there's a lot of chat going on online at the moment, and definitely 8th edition has slowed Forge World down a fair amount. There have been a lot of staff changes, expansion. Specialist Games now has 4 model designers that were there listed as model designers for them. Apparently they're looking, because James Hewitt's left them now, they're looking to replace him with 2 rules writers, because every game they release still needs updating whilst they then work on the next game. So they're only and that's going to grow. And people were saying that it's dragging resources away from the Heresy. I don't think that's the case, because they're employing more people. But it does have a bit of an effect for now. Heresy's had 8th edition's had a bit of an effect. Obviously, Alan's passing's had a bit of an effect again. Certain deadlines they've been asked to hit by GW have had an effect. That I'm fairly sure that's a small part of it, but a part of it. And things like Fires of Craxus has been shown to be affected by some of the stuff that's going on. So it's bound to have an effect. Yes, they are different departments, but there's stuff that they need to pull together sometimes to do. And we're going to be waiting for the problem with Heresy is we're always waiting for that next book, which is a year and a half away. So we're always a little bit of that lapse anyway, that gap between big things that we can really get our teeth into. And some people, because of the nature of a lot of the releases being custodies, and some people really not being down with them, they view that as, well, this is wasted time. No, nothing's come out for the Heresy. And it's like, well, hold on. There's quite a lot of people collecting custodies who really like them. So,
and also it's nice that, I mean, we've seen it a few times where they've they've released something new like that, and they then go hell for leather getting loads and loads of stuff out for it. And let's face it, Custodes had nothing, did they? I mean,
no.
They came out with a couple of plastic sprues, and then it's a case of, right, well, now we've got to build the whole force behind it. At least with Marines, they can replicate stuff, and it's just sometimes adding stuff on, a few Legion-specific items, etc.
And I think sales probably help with that. That if they sell a few, they like push them up a little bit. And we know the Space Force things have been worked on. Most of the Thousand Suns are out now. You know, okay, Space Force haven't had their stuff, but again, right, well, Blood Angels haven't had a thing. Yeah, right, perspective. Yeah, it's frustrating for people who want to collect their Space Force stuff, but we know it's coming. And by all accounts, I haven't had a look round at all the chat. You can go onto Gary, you can go onto Battle Bunnies, and 30k forums have got collected the rumours and all that stuff. And apparently the Death Sworn will be in there, and the multi-part kits for them, and the Varangier, and Haval might even get his heavy bolter wielding model as well. So if we get everything we kind of want from it, we might have to wait a couple of months. This is real first world problems. It's frustrating, don't get me wrong, but let's not take it beyond what it is. Because, as I say, at the end of the day, White Scars players are sitting there wondering when they're going to get their thing. So, yeah. And I won't get too much else into the open day in terms of Heresy, except to say that talked to Sam, and he told me Rogal Dawn is about 2 weeks away from him completing his part of it. I'm sure there'll still be some issues from there on, because there probably are, and he may or may not have seen his base as well, but didn't want to talk to me about that because he wasn't 100% sure, because he hasn't talked to the bloke who's designing that, because different person.
Yeah, because they often split it up, don't they? Sometimes, I can try to remember the name of the sculptor. Someone else did the weapons sometimes, didn't he? And then Sam would do the actual body and the pose, and someone else might do the base. Yeah,
so he was talking about, I think it's this, but I don't want to say it just in case. I kind of pressed him on next Primarch, and he was like, no, I can't tell you. I was like, what kind of stage you're at? He's like, well, I'm thinking about how I want him to look. So very early stages. Having got home, looked on the internet, some people are saying that it's Alfarius and his work's well started. It wouldn't be the first time that I've been fed the company line while someone else has found a much looser source of information. And that's fair enough. So it might be that Alfarius is being worked on. And this is the thing, I'm not saying they're lying, but the only official source I've had any information from has said nothing about who it is, and that work hasn't really started yet. So, I don't know. But I was wrong when I was blatantly told Russ wasn't next when Russ was next. So, and it's weird. As a podcaster, as someone who's getting to know these people every time I go to these things and consider some of them to be friends, Forge World, I want to push, but I want to respect boundaries, and I also don't want to be the person that's, every time I contact someone there, I'm saying, what are you working on? Because that's not what I want from these people. I respect them too much as people, So it's a little bit of an interesting situation when I find out other people find out this information. Maybe they're just asking questions better than I do. Maybe they're asking the better people to ask than I do.
It can be that maybe they jump to conclusions as well.
And there certainly is some of that. My worry about saying that is people will say, oh, he's saying that about my bit of information. I'm not. And I have times I've kind of said, well, are you jumping to conclusions? And I've been proved wrong. Because actually someone's actually specifically told them. But again, the people that I go and ask say, no, no.
Just flat no as well,
Cheers.
isn't it?
Yeah, and I do get no's, and if I ask the people that I'm most friendly with at Forge World, if I show them a picture that's going round online, they will say, "Oh, what's that?" when they know full well it's being released the next day, you know? But that's because their stance is, I just say no until it's out and then can never get in trouble for it, which I absolutely respect. Because I would hate for someone to get in trouble with their boss because a bit of information that wasn't supposed to be out was tracked back through me to them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, so, completely.
And I just kind of want to explain, because I don't know if necessarily that's obvious to outside sources, to listeners, you know, people like that. But yeah, I'm not an investigative journalist. Some of these people seem to have the skills for that. I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah, I'll take that. And I must admit, this open day was much more about meeting my mates. Say my girlfriend came up, so showing her around Warhammer World and experiencing that. And Necromunda and Specialist Games is becoming a very big part of what I do. Fanatic podcast is going to handle that, but I've been interested in pretty much all the GW games for a long time. So yeah, but it was an interesting one. I think for those people who are negative about the open days, you know, kind of hope they didn't come to this one, because there was a little bit of something kind of lacking. And I think it's partly the number of people who weren't there who you expect to be there. For a sold-out event, didn't feel very busy. When we all gathered for the Warlord raffle, it was fairly packed, but it was comfortable. And at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you could easily get to look at like the cabinets and stuff.
Oh, do you think there's less tickets, or?
I think there's I think there's probably a number of things. I think one of the things was tickets were made available. People purchased them, so they sold out quite early. And I don't know if you saw, but the last week or so, there were quite a few tickets being sold on. And I
saw quite a lot of people selling them on, yeah.
I wonder if people were thinking, when they announced kind of what was going to be available, oh, there's nothing there for me to purchase, or oh, I was expecting Space Wolves. So I wonder if the purchases did affect a certain amount of, you know, what's going on. But yeah, who knows? Who knows? Yeah, I haven't heard anything concrete. That's really me kind of just trying to put two and together and make 17. But yeah, it was cool. It was good. I always enjoy these events. Certainly, I probably wouldn't have gone to this one if it wasn't for the podcast, because of the time taken to get up there and the money involved in doing so. And I went with the podcast in mind, and maybe that didn't pay off this time, although might have paid off a little bit more for Fnatic. But the next open day will have to be, if it's kind of too near other events, I probably won't go. You know, the New Year's open day is always a bit fun, because it feels like still on holiday, Christmas period and all that. So potentially go up for that one. But yeah, it depends what I've got on around it, because you know it's more expense. I can't keep paying.
It is. In some ways, I was busy and I couldn't go, and I'm quite glad in some ways that I didn't go. Mainly because I think wouldn't have been enough for me there to me feel as I got value out of going.
Sure.
If that makes sense. So in some ways, I'm glad I didn't go, but. It's it's interesting with the sort of, like, you know, without seeing huge amounts of new stuff. You know, it's a long old way to go for a day.
Yeah, it wouldn't be so bad if we didn't go to so many events.
Yes, you know, if there wasn't so many things in the calendar throughout the year.
Yeah, and we go to the Heresy weekend. I go to the Black Library weekend, and now that's back. Went to Black Library Live. Went to the January Open Day. You know, and there's only so much. There's only so many times you can walk around the display hall, and it was different this year because I was walking around there with the girlfriend, and that was awesome. But you know, I'll walk through it, but I'll walk through it at a quick pace if it's just me, and go, oh, what's new? And I can go into the Forge World bit and I can chat to them, and Trish is there with her dragon like she's been for 2 years, and nothing much has changed there. The Hobbit is great, but I'm not overly interested in discussing that with the guys. And don't get me wrong, the guys are brilliant, and Adam knows the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings so well, and that's brilliant. And then they go to the artist, and it's like, oh, cool, they're doing more drawing, and yeah, the image is different, but the processes are pretty similar. Same with Holly, she might have something new to show, but the processes don't really change. Go to the painters, painting doesn't change. Yeah, go to the sculptors. Okay, maybe they're working on something slightly different, but again, the similar processes, and then the rules writers, and that was one thing would have been very interesting with, obviously post Alan and everything like that, to see how they were progressing, but they weren't there this time. I did go and have a chat to the guys, Specialist, because Steve, I can't remember his surname now, Steve's over at Specialist, and they're doing, Forge World are actually doing their own plastic stuff, obviously utilising GW's methods and everything else like that, but this wasn't as far as I can tell, this is not Specialist Games in conjunction with GW Main, like Battle for Prospero. This is more like they're doing with, and they've been doing it with the Blood Bowl, and it's obviously come from that. Talking to him now, they've expanded the team of Forge World are making plastic toys, and the different issues with sculpting plastic and resin was quite interesting about how they go about it and things like that. But cool, okay, we got to talk about Necromunda for a bit. Oh, how's it working? Yeah, got loads of information. Cool. Adeptus Titanicus. There's a release date in mind. They're not going to say it just in case they don't hit it, which is completely understandable, because if they give a release date and don't hit it, they'll just get grief. That's no win situation for them. But they're getting it ready for what they want. There are certain... One of the issues there is the release schedule. Right? The year's only so long. And we were discussing in the queue what the big Necromunda rumours could be, and it's like, is it just a computer game? Doesn't seem right that GW would take it on, and they gave us things. I was like, okay, it's Forge World. And then I started to think, okay, well, are they aiming for a November release? Because there's always a release in November. Has been for donkey's years. And it's been Battle for Prospero, it's been Betrayal at Calth. Before that, it's been Hobbit releases, a number of years of box games, but box game releases have often been around that something is released in November pre-Christmas, and this year it will be Necromunda, and that may have had. I don't think it's pushed Adeptus Titan. I think you've got to be careful when you say that. I think maybe some resources potentially, and this is again not fact, but some of the resources may have been pushed that way. But I do know that they want Adeptus Titanicus to come out and to roll out straight away. So, and that's why, because it's the delay on the Adeptus Titanicus has been pretty long to make sure they're ready. And Blood Bowl's had an effect on that because of the sales and everything else. They're riding this big wave, and you've got to ride it properly, otherwise it will throw you off.
Yeah, completely. It's interesting that we all know Necromunda is going to sell, don't we? Really, it's going to be a massive selling piece, and maybe they've looked at how long it's going to take to get that out. Where they've got probably they recycle a rule set, etc. A bit like Blood Bowl, where if it's not broke, don't fix it.
No, they're changing the game. So that it's been worked on for a while. Necromunda. James Hewitt helped write it. James Hewitt's no longer with the company, and it will be using a modified 8th edition rule set with activation, individual model activation. I go, you go, in terms of model activation, with some adaptation around that. But one thing that really made it kick off was the Shadow War terrain that they made.
Yeah.
Right. Suddenly, GW are making quantities of plastic terrain that can be used for Necromunda, so they don't have to worry about cardboard terrain or how expensive is the box going to have to be for the terrain. So there are things like that, and GW want to put a thing out in November, and the companies work differently within themselves, but GW pay the bills. So there's any pressure from that side of things. And GW, from the outside looking in, I think we all feel, whether it's true or not, that Forge World is more... The people who run Forge World, yes, they've got budgets and whatever and what have you, but they're not as... Trying to say this in the right way, kind of without making it sound awful, but GW have the shareholders to be responsible for. Forge World have their bosses to be responsible for at GW. And there's kind of a different thing there. So GW are like, well, we need to make money for the shareholders. We need to do this, we need to do that. Whereas Forge World, within their own bubble, are like, we need to make this game cool, we need to get it out. Yes, we need to hit this deadline and blah, blah, blah. But their pressure comes from their boss rather than kind of the financial aspect of it purely, if you know what I mean. If that makes sense to people. I probably said that in a way that completely confuses people and is probably wrong, but it feels, it's certainly from the outside, it feels like Forge World are able to focus more on just getting the game or whatever right, whereas there is a concentration in GW of, well, we need to make sure we're releasing this at that point for money, for maximising returns and everything else.
Yes, sure.
And as I say, with limited release slots as well, I mean, we heard while we were at the Golden Demon Winners' Day from a third-party source, not directly from GW, that they were actually slowing down, like they were having to hold stuff back to make sure they didn't oversaturate certain releases. It's almost like the last 2 years, the growth's almost painful in its speed.
Yes.
And maybe there's a maximum speed they can go, because we've only got 365 days in a year. We've only got 52 weeks, 52 Saturdays to release stuff. And we've got Forge World, we've got Black Library, you got Heresy Specialist Games and Lord of the Rings just from Forge World, plus GW Prime, so 40k Age of Sigmar, and then you've got Black Library, and then you've got anything else you want to do as well.
Yes, I think they tried that experiment, didn't they? What, about a couple of years ago? Do you remember when they had the weekly White Dwarf, and every week it was another major release, another codex, another army book, another big model, and it just felt far too quick to try and keep up with the progress. And I think maybe they learnt that if they just try and hit out loads and loads and loads of releases, if people can't keep up, it could push them away from actually doing anything at all, because they feel as though they can't keep up with the speed of it. So maybe they are trying to hold back and just try and make sure that they pace themselves as they bring things out.
Yeah, and there'll be weekly releases for sure. But again, yeah, as you say, it's about pacing them out correctly. It's allowing people to be able to give you that money as they want to give you that money. And it's tricky. I don't envy them, because at the end of the day, they could just churn out so much stuff. They really could. But yeah, I think in the long term that would be detrimental. So it's a really kind of... It's a great, awkward, horrible position they're in. And the reason they're in this position is because they're doing so well at the moment. And they're just running with it. But they might just have to pull the reins back a bit, which slows everything up, which means the customer's like, oh, when are we getting this? When are we getting this? And again, we talked before about the release schedules and the way Forge World are handling things, the way GW have handled things now for a while. Control of information. And making sure that expectations aren't too ambitious, and so we don't disappoint the customers. So no release date for Adeptus Titanicus, because it might not hit that release date, and even if it's only 2 weeks late, people will be disappointed.
Yes,
I think it was again. It's unfortunate that they had that issue with the original release date of Adeptus Titanicus, and this is dragged on, but. We're getting there. We're getting there. And I'm wondering as well, I don't know, I've said it for a little while now, is their site big enough, If Forge World are going to be starting making plastic, do they need more tooling machines? they need more churning more stuff out. I don't know. Because at the end of the day, money, part of the cost, and it's quite funny, bearing in mind the lawsuit that's going on at the moment. The resin costs you nothing, the plastic costs you nothing. Part of one of the costs of making plastic models is the time the model has to sit on the mould, because that obviously limits how much you can do in a day.
Yes.
And even if it's 5 seconds, I have no idea if that's true or not. Again, plucking a figure out of the air. If it's 5 seconds compared to 10 seconds, that's every mould takes an extra 10 seconds, like to cool down, to be removed. Then that builds up into a lot less moulds that can be done. But who knows? They've got a big facility up there. They've got other little bits dotted around Nottingham. But part of me wonders, like, are we going to see a time soon where they expand that manufacturing facility there? I don't know.
Or set up, like you say, set up another. I know they've got the American site, haven't they, where they produce stuff. Do they have to start looking at increasing production outside of Nottingham? You never know.
Yeah, and I think what they might do, rather than that, I would think they'd move their main site in Nottingham to a place that's bigger, or buy up the stuff around it. Yeah, which it may or may not be possible. I don't know, but I don't think Nottingham's never got too much of a wealth of talent now, and the wargaming industry in Nottingham. Whether the markets kind of in other places deserve or are big enough for their own manufacturing facilities, don't know. That's a different issue. I did actually, there was one interesting thing, which is GW related, but it's quite interesting. So most listeners of this show will be, America and the UK are the two large, quite obviously, probably the largest listening demographic we have. Australia, Canada, and Sweden are the three next. And then there's a number of European countries and some New Zealanders and other places, the odd one dotted around. But certainly, varying amounts of European non-native English-speaking countries are there. And I never really thought about it too much, but we look at the Swedes and it appears to me that most Swedes speak English to some level. And there's an automatic understanding, therefore, that they can listen to the English podcast. In fact, they podcast in English, right? Some of them. So, there's a great level of comprehension of the English language, which is fantastic. As a guy who's not very good with languages, it's amazing. And so we don't have to worry about catering to a Swedish market. But the other European markets don't necessarily have that higher level of English being taught, or Germany was pointing out, particularly by one of the women who worked for GW, as a market where they're talking about having German speakers or certainly translators, maybe not non-native speakers, but working for the Warhammer community team to target the German market.
Oh, right.
As a potentially large market that doesn't have the high percentage of English speaking as second language to the level required that some countries do, like Sweden, and also where they have allegedly, and this is what she was telling me, so this, I'm going off something else, they have a very the culture is pick a career, do that career for the rest of your life from school onwards. And if you don't, you end up doing the more basic menial jobs. And a few people break away from that mould. And the war games industry, the gaming industry in Germany is dominated by slightly older people. And when she phones them up and says, "Do you want to stop Warhammer?" the reply is well, that sounds a bit too fighting. Don't know if you know, but we had this issue 70 years ago, and it's a bit of a touchy subject for wargaming to be a fun pastime. And so certainly in some circles there's a reluctance to get into an active fighting game because of cultural memory, essentially. And it was all of a sudden, it's oh yeah, okay, that's something. As GW grow, actually one of the biggest growth they can do is hit those non-English speaking countries, or where it's not as high. And it was like,
Yeah,
wow, okay.
sure, definitely.
So, and just little things like that as the growth of GW. It's a really interesting kind of something I think it's always just underneath that once you say it sounds obvious, but we don't think about, particularly in England, where it's all catered for. We're fine.
Yeah, because I've often seen those jobs posted up about the, editors to, translate their product into all these other all these other languages. But I suppose that's probably only the first step, isn't it? Really,
That's the least, isn't it?
That's the least that you're going to do,
Yeah.
and there's probably so much more they can do on top of that to really make it, take off.
And they probably identified Germany as a very large gaming market. Eschen Spiel is, one of the biggest gaming events in the world, certainly into their board games over there. But a board game market potentially can become a miniature market quite easily. But
yeah, definitely.
So interesting with GW moving that way with everything that's going on. There's a lot of interesting things, and with that come challenges. I'm not even going to go into detail about the lawsuit. You can Google it, find it on the forums. It's quite sad, I think. There's certainly two sides to the tale, but go and find that, and we won't cover that here. But there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on with GW at the moment, and in general, it's good. So there we go. That was another long intro section. It's all fun, isn't it? All fun. Awesome. You got anything else to shout at us?
Not really on the intro, no. Nothing
cool.
else.
We'll go to the how to attract gamers. We're into our how-to section, and we're going to do how to attract gamers. Now, this is because with the split between editions for 40k going to 8th edition, there has been kind of a bit of a shift, and there are areas. It's not every area. This is not, it's not a direct relevance to every area, but in some places, the Heresy gaming's faded. In some places, it wasn't there to start with. And actually, sometimes it's just kind of a good thing to be aware of as well. Even if you are in a healthy environment, it means if people do leave, that you still maybe be able to attract new gamers in, which is quite important if you want to keep playing games.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a strong possibility that people may fade away or start, doing other things without that sort of progression. So it's a good, you've got to try and think about, where's your next game coming from.
Yeah, and life's cyclical anyway. You see it a lot with ups and downs with the amount of gamers you have in places and things like that. So it's always good just to be aware that you might have to think about how do you get people to come play your game when, let's face it, there are lots of options out there.
Yes, definitely, loads.
So the first thing that I've always thought is to be positive about what you're playing. Now, we play Heresy, so this is going to be all Heresy related. It's very easy to demean other games, but we'll go into that later. Why that's not good. It's better to stick to being positive about your game. So in the Heresy, what are our strengths? The background. Warhammer 40,000 has the hugest kind of lore in any miniature game, and pushing on it rivals some of the biggest kind of IPs out there, doesn't it?
Yeah, I had a friend that often went on. He was a massive fantasy player. We'd often joke about how he always played fantasy and would say that 40k was the sort of the starter game and fantasy was the adult game, etc. And he would always say how much he loved fantasy, but how he always thought that 40k had the much better story behind it and all of the all of the detail. He just always thought it was far and above, way better. Yeah,
there's lots of people like that down the years. The wealth and depth of background, we've talked about it before. The lore, Star Wars has a lot of books out. Yeah, maybe that's bigger, but you're not finding too many IPs which have a depth and breadth that matches 40k. And yeah, some of it's not great and some of it's a little bit old, but actually in the main a lot of it's quite cool, and recently they've really stepped up what they're doing. Yes, we don't get to see all of 40k in the Heresy. We get the origin story of the Heresy. I mean, how many book series are 45 books long and still going? Yeah?
Yes, exactly.
That's just for the mainline Heresy stories. That's without the Primarchs and everything else. On top of that, you then have how that interacts with 40k, because most of us have a knowledge or are interested in like the universe as a whole as well. So there's a huge kind of draw in. And how many armies do you see made because someone read a book?
Yeah. That is a very popular way of building an army, isn't it?
Yeah, they like a character, or they like a chapter, or they like a part of a legion, or what have you. It's a huge part of why we play the game, because at the end of the day, Games Workshop, their games are about storytelling. No matter that you can play them in different ways, it's about storytelling, and most of the time in the Heresy, that's what we're looking at. We talk about as a group. We talk about the background for your army. How does it fit into the Heresy? So there's a strong connection there. Moving on from that, the models. So if one way to get people in, and they've done it through video games and whatever, is however they look at the lore. Another way is they look at the models. And we have, in the Heresy, we have some of the nicest models that are put out in the gaming industry.
Yes, definitely.
It really is that simple. Now, objectively, you might not appreciate some models. You might like some models either, but your opinion on what looks good is one thing, but the quality of the models for a start, and then the range and level of detail and ability of the artist means there's going to be something in that line that you like. Now, yeah, it does have a gothic kind of approach to it, but actually, in the Heresy now, we're seeing there's plenty of stuff that doesn't. So if you're not into dark grittiness, maybe you don't go for Death Guard. Maybe you go for Thousand Suns, in their candy red, as it's described. Maybe you go a step further and have Custodians, who are, they're not that kind of dark, dim, gothic style. They've got jet bikes, they've got hover tanks, they've got that, amazing flyer. There's a lot of options there. There's a huge scope. That's before you get into the militia, which you can make up how you want, and you can find somewhere in the Heresy to utilise those cool models. I think it would be hard pressed to get anyone who's into model gaming who isn't dead set against Games Workshop to find. It would be hard for them not to find something they love in the Heresy.
I think a key thing with that is maybe trying to also put across that it's not all about Space Marines.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes the Heresy can be tarred with a brush of, well, it's Space Marines versus Space Marines. And I think if you can show that in the models, in that the variety of the different things that you can bring to the table, then actually people get a lot more excited about it. How many times have we seen people play Heresy games and then someone turn around and say, well, what's that model? What's that? And we can pull in Heresy. The one benefit you have is some very cool toys.
Yes.
Because some of the Forge World models, especially the bigger stuff, really is impressive when it's on the tabletop.
Yeah.
And that can draw people in very easily.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, down to the base level of some of the line miniatures, that they are. There are people out there who don't like Space Marines, and so they turn around and they say, "Oh, Heresy's just Space Marine on Space Marines." Well, okay, cool. Well, you can play Custodians, Sisters Battle, within the Talons list. You can play humans in a couple of armies. You can play demons. You can play Mechanicum. So that's 5 armies straight away that you can play that are not Space Marines. Now, for those people who do like Space Marines, who are like, why do I want another Space Marines army? You can even still go into those Space Marine lists and go, well, have you seen this in a Space Marine army? And 30k does offer up some differences. You know, when you see a World Eater's force on the table, it looks completely different to a Raven Guard force. And yes, there's still power armoured, Terminator armoured dudes and some tanks. But actually, the overall aesthetic, and even down to individual aesthetic, is very different.
Yeah, and I think that's something that Forge World have been very good at, is giving everything its own particular flavour, and not going to, well, it's like normal Space Marines. Everything does have its individual flavours, and again, if they're painted in attractive colour schemes and things, I think that also can set them well apart from some of their 40k counterparts. Like you mentioned, World Eaters there, you know, a 30k World Eater force looks completely different to what a Khorne World Eater armor looks like in 40k. So you can make that really stand out. You know, if someone's they love, their World Eaters in 40k, they could do a 30k army, but it'd be completely different to what what their other army looks like.
Yeah, and another helping factor in that is the different armour marks.
Yes.
You know, in 40k, yeah, there are differences, but in general, it's Mark 6, 7, with a few bits and pieces dotted here and there. You can make your whole Death Guard army in Mark, 2, or Mark 3, or Mark 4, or Mark 5. You can choose to do what you want, and you can still go and have your Raven Guard all in Mark 6, or your Alpha Legion in a mix of different armours. And even just that, they do, though they're still power armour, it's identifiably different between a Heresy Mark 3 army or Mark 4 armour army, and then a 40k army that's mainly Mark 6, Mark 7.
Yes.
It is quite surprising sometimes, kind of how different they look. We talked a bit about storytelling, but we've got to remember there are different types of gamers out there. So this is maybe less true than it was with old 40k and Warhammer, in terms of Games Workshop have now provided a narrative playset which helps kind of codify how to play a narrative game. Kind of allows it, makes it seem more official. It's probably the best term. And that's essentially what the Forge World books do, is they provide this narrative and make it seem like the official way to play the game. Now, people still play absolute kind of hardcore Heresy. They still do, go and smash the opposition. But you can make the most of that story by having, and some of it's cheesy to some people and some of it's completely not. You can name characters. You can actually play the non-even missions from books. You can throw in extra special rules onto the table, and the Forge World books are full of them. Whether it's terrain effects or what have you, there is so much stuff that you can do in that storytelling. One of the easiest ways might be just to get the Zone Mortalis out. Yeah, and that all of a sudden that looks...
And that seems to be very popular now as well. People really enjoying the Zone Mortalis.
It's a different way to play. When we... Potentially one of the issues with the games we have is we tend to get in a rut of... it looks this way with 8th edition. Everyone's playing 2,000 points, and they play this way and they play the same 6 missions. In Heresy, you play the same kind of 6 missions and you do 2,500 to 3,000 points. I'm not saying everyone does that, because obviously they don't, but it's very easy to get in that's a comfortable rut to be in. I know I can go to the game store, 2,500 to 3,000 points gets done in a certain amount of time, play these missions because then there's nothing complicated, but break it up. You come out and put a Zone Mortalis board down, and there are third-party companies you can go and look at if you can't afford the Forge World one. That's understandable. You don't even need the actual Zone Mortalis style board to play that kind of game either. You can apply rules to an open tabletop on a smaller format, like they did at Adepticon. Guys did brilliant really with that. And that is a completely different game. It looks different, and it piques people's interest. What are those guys doing?
Exactly.
Because we probably should have mentioned right at the top, like, where are you trying to get these gamers from? Now, I play in a games club, so we have anything's allowed at the game club. If you play in a Games Workshop, it's only going to be GW games. Our game club has a predominant GW bias. There are some Infinity players, some people who play other games as well, and board games. So to the Infinity guys and what have you, maybe we just look like another GW game. You kind of have to show off. But maybe those guys have never really seen a GW game. So it looks very different from the games they're playing because of the way Games Workshop is. That's easier to gain interest. Gaining interest from a 40k player might be a little bit more tricky. But as you say, that's where maybe the big toys come in. The real Forge World pieces. Yeah, people have seen Imperial Knights on the table, but have they seen 3 or 4 a Castigator, a Knight Porphyrion? When
exactly.
Porphyrion gets put on the table, it draws attention. Yeah. So a Mastodon was the classic one at London. Matt Woodsmith had his Mastodon, and he was on the end of a row where people walked past to go out the door. And I was only there for half a minute, and I must have seen about 5-6 people talking about that huge tank. Because they weren't sure what it was, because they've never looked at the Forge World kind of Heresy bit, because they play 40k.
Yeah, and it's very different for them because they're in I don't know. I'm not a competitive 40k player, but they probably are they allowed to take those sort of large Forge World models in a competitive 40k environment? Do they just breeze over them and not even look at them?
Yeah, as I say, some tournaments don't allow those kind of things. They didn't have 40k rules. A lot of Heresy stuff didn't used to have 40k rules. Now in 8th edition, that's redressed a fair amount, but these people were looking at models that they play competitively, or they play in a competitive style, and so they were like, well, I can't take it, don't even bother with it. And it was like, wow, what's that cool tank? Never seen it before. So having those things out, and that, it helped that Matt's is beautifully painted as well, but actually it was the tank that drew the attention, because they were wondering what the tank is. They weren't talking about the paint job on it, they were talking about the tank itself. If it's really well painted as well, it's always going to be a bonus, isn't it?
Yes, well, it does help.
Yeah, and within that, making a cool looking table, having some cool terrain, when you're playing the game, actually look like you're having fun.
Yeah, don't make it look as though it's a chore.
No, and that's harder for some people who've maybe got less naturally kind of smiley faces. But if people come over and you're staring intently at the game, and it's looking like a chess match, then they're possibly going to be less likely to be interested in what you're up to. If you're playing and you're laughing, you're kind of half cheering at stuff, and you're just engaging with your opponent as you move, that's going to help. It's going to help because at the end of the day, if people don't like the atmosphere of games being played in, they're either going to think the game's not fun, or the people who are playing it aren't fun. They're not going to want to play with either. But
that is, you've got to, if a game doesn't look as though it's going to be much fun to play because everyone's taking it way too seriously, then there's probably going to be an element of thinking, I don't think I'll bother starting that.
No, absolutely. It all helps create the image that surrounds the game in itself, which is really cool. We're kind of jumping around a little bit in our notes here, which is quite interesting. There are times as well, I would say, like some people will come up and ask about rules as well. We all know people talk about other games without actually fully knowing, and you roll your eyes and, oh yeah, they completely don't understand that rule, that kind of thing. Be open. Like when people are talking about it, say, okay, yeah, there are rules that maybe you don't like, but our group's quite happy. We got the FAQ in Heresy, which some people don't use all of it, in their individual gaming groups. They pick and choose aspects of it which they feel really against the way they want to play the game. That's cool. Sometimes you have to say, okay, there's a small aspect of this game that you might not like, but overall, will that affect your game? There's a reason for it. It's in the rules for a reason. Maybe you don't take... Maybe it's the way tanks work, super heavies work. So when I play you, I won't use super heavies because I know you don't like them. And if you both engage on that kind of level, then you can have a fun game. So there's ways of approaching how you play in the game as well to address people's issues. And it might be a case of, which happens so many times, oh yeah, I've read the rule book, I don't like this rule. Okay, cool, well, we'll start off at, maybe try it now. And then all of a sudden, I understand now, but actually because of these other rules, that rule now makes sense and fits in with the way the game should be played. But it's not until you played the game and see the interactions that are available to understand why it's there.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard, particularly with one of the big things we're going to have as Heresy players, is we've got to tell people they're going to have to read quite a hefty rule book if they've never played before.
Yeah, no, if they've already played the old version of 40k,
it's fine.
Probably not too bad, although they might have even thought, well, I've moved on from that now, and does that mean I've got to go and try and remember all these rules? But yeah, there is that element. If they're coming into it completely new, you've got to try and get them over that hurdle.
And one of the ways of doing that is, I've said before, I used to be a GW staffer, and when we run intro games, you don't use all the rules.
Yes,
you build it up. When someone comes up to you and says, I'm interested in playing, you go, okay, cool. We'll get about 1,000 points out, all infantry, and we'll show you what the different kind of Legion special rules can work at. You don't have to show everything straight away. And then you can bring in the tanks, and then you can bring in the slightly weird stuff. And you can go from there. Or you could simplify it, and you don't need to tell them there's a chart and you need to take your ballistic skill away from 7 to get the score. You can just go, yeah, those guys hit on 3s. Because if you're interested in the game but not sure if you're that bothered, if someone says, oh yeah, before you play you need to read these 30, 40 pages of rules, right? A lot of people just aren't going to bother. So, cool, no worries about it, mate. You got Space Marines, 3s to hit, away you go. Yeah?
Yeah.
And essentially, that's why 8th edition has moved to that 3+ to hit and everything else that people look at, because it's simple.
Yeah.
Now, if they're looking for more granularity in the terms of like how they hit each other in combat, yeah, they might want to play 7th edition, but for the first game, it might not be an issue. There are some people who will love to read 40 pages of rulebook and go from there.
See, I used to quite like it. I always used to love scouring the rulebook and trying to pick up all the little rules, but I can understand where that is a big barrier for people.
When did you start playing 40k?
Well, yeah, back when many years ago, when it's 2nd edition I started playing.
And where did you start playing?
Just with some friends from school.
With some friends. And how many rules did you get wrong? Or not?
Oh yeah, loads of them. But I used
exactly.
one of my enjoyments was, reading the rule book when you weren't playing with your friends and going, yeah, I played that rule wrong. I must remember that next time.
Absolutely.
And that was always a good fun thing to do.
Yeah, but that's what you do once you're interested in the game. So yeah, there's a balance to be had there, and you've got to judge the person. You've got to talk to them. See what how much they want to. Some people will say, no, I want to learn hardcore, all the rules from the start. Some people will go, give me a gist of what's going on. You've got to balance that. I mean, you've got to accept the game with them first. It's one thing that you have to do. If people are looking interested in the game as a group, someone has to be able to play these people. And ideally, it's going to be someone who has the kind of skill set to do that with noobs and to be welcoming. And there's always one in a group who's like, yeah, don't let him in, a new guy. That bloke doesn't know when to take his foot off the gas. We had a old store manager in Tunbridge Wells who used to smash every kid when he played them. No matter if it was he'd moan about his dice and everything. That's not what you want to do in a teaching game. Yeah, you want to be open. You want to be having fun, and you want to be showing off the game. That is generally what you're doing. You're not trying to show them the intricacies. If they're new to wargaming, you're not showing any intricacies of the game system. You're showing them how to play so they can start to understand themselves how to move that on to another level. But yeah, I've seen it before. I've seen it quite a few times. But there's no glory in smashing the new bloke who doesn't understand how the game works.
Yeah, it's a bit like shooting fish in a barrel, that, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And when they come as well, the chances are they're not going to have models. So, obviously, they're going to have to either proxy or borrow models. Now, depending on who it is, you might not want to lend people models, and I understand that. But if you can lend people well-painted models, that's going to have more of an impression than, oh yeah, we'll just use these. And grabbing some plastic and green and red guys out of a box. It's all about making... And most adults will know and they will disassociate if they do that, but it will stick in their mind that little bit better if they've got some cool models to play with.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. Cool models make everything better.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if you're not in this hobby, if you don't like cool models, you've got to wonder why you're in this hobby.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, there's lots of stuff. In fact, actually making yourself available. Sometimes it can be, okay, we know there's this many people who are starting to show an interest. Right, I'm going to phone up Dan. Next time at the club, we're going to make sure we have this kind of highlight Heresy game. We're going to get our table out in the middle of the hall so that everyone can kind of see it rather than stuck in a corner. Dan, what's your best models? Okay, we'll play 3,000 points. Bring Horus, because he's cool. Who doesn't like seeing Horus? I'll bring something a bit like some out of their choices and whatever. We'll set up a scenario and we'll actually make it a kind of attending game. So a game that's designed to be seen. Because again, draws attention. That almost allows people to come over and have a look as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And in that case, you want to use your best models. You want to make sure they're all painted. You want to try and get the best terrain out. You want to definitely be having fun with it. And you want to see people seeing you having fun, because we play these games for fun. Now, some people's fun is the tactical side of things. They might be serious. They're not going to jump on that kind of thing. But I think most people just love to roll dice and, moan about their bad luck and cheer when they kill the thing that they can never kill and all that jazz. So you can set up a display, almost a display game. If you go to any convention or show, you might see them out, people playing them. You can still be done in a club environment. If those people are at your club, you can see. The other thing you can do is you can open up a trial night for Heresy. I'm going to be there. I'm not going to have an opponent. I'm going to have, as I say, a couple of 1,000-point armies. If anyone wants to have a go, I'll play you.
Yeah.
Come along and definitely. Try it out. Don't have to bring anything. I'll have dice, I'll have tape measures, I'll have models, and come along and play. And at the end of the day, someone's got to make a move. And if people aren't coming to you, sometimes you have to open the invite for them to come to you. Because people might say, I don't really want to, those guys are always playing, I don't want to get in their way, and I don't want him to have to take a night off playing his games to teach me. Well, if you don't do that, how do they get into the game?
Yeah,
and the onus comes on the players then, and you have to sacrifice one of your game nights to do a slightly different kind of gaming. And some people really love teaching people in that respect. Some people don't, and sometimes you have to work at it. If there's only 3 of you at a club playing Heresy, one of those 3 has to step up. And you can do it together. You can have 2 of you saying, yeah, okay, I'll play on your side, and we'll both play against him, and we'll go through it as well. You can lighten the load, but you can't. You've got to be prepared to put some effort in to do it. It's great. Every now and then, people will come up and go, "I really like the look of that game," and they'll do it all themselves. But sometimes you have to put that effort in. You got anything else before we?
No, I'll just say that, also I know that it's not really attracting gamers, but I was up at Warhammer World this week, and I've got a free ticket for going in the exhibition hall, and I thought, well, I'll go and see where my models are, although they were wrongly labelled with saying that my winning golds were winning bronzes, which is a bit annoying. I did notice that actually the majority of the entries that had been left to be shown were Heresy models. So I would say that maybe there is a way of also attracting people in via painting and that sort of
definitely
thing. Obviously, people you see some really cool competition painted pieces. That in the one cabinet I looked in, I was like, wow, nearly all of the stuff has come from the Heresy Golden Demon, and then even some of the other stuff that was in there I was like, oh, I think that was from Heresy stuff that came from the other, like the classic demon, etc.
Yeah.
So it is also good to say that there's that element of attracting people into it as well. If you can get someone painting one of a cool figure, that is a great way to then get them to maybe start playing with a cool figure. Yeah. So, if have you thought about painting one of these models? They look really cool. They start painting that up. They learn a bit of the background of maybe what Legion they're painting, and they then become, think, well, I've got a few of these models now. Well, I might try a game. And then if they try the game and like it, that is then the first thing to sort of really kick them on into building an army and going from there.
Yeah, most of what we talked about before here is how do you attract gamers that are at your club or in your circle or, that But, yeah, you're right. Even just having those models up there, we've got wonderful resources now. We've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, we've got forums coming out everywhere. We've got Instagram that we can go and put ourselves out there. You can go to Bolton and Chainsword or Heresy 30k or wherever, and you can say, here's our club. There's a section for it. Here's our club. We're in London, we're in Bristol, we're in the middle of nowhere. We play every da-da-da-da. Why don't you come along and have a look? And I mean, we're lucky. I've got the podcast, so there's a bit of advertising from that. And a number of people come to the club through various online methods of finding out our club's there. Some of them live close, some of them live further away, some are down every week, some are occasional visitors. But we've gone out, we've put our details out there. When I'm on Facebook, when I'm on Twitter, Instagram, putting up my models, constantly talking about the club, or I'm in Tunbridge Wells, playing games at the club, whatever. Every day I say, oh, are you near us? Are you near here? Or where are you? Or sometimes even, oh, I've been looking at this. Your games look really cool, the games you're showing at your club. I live in wherever, village in Derbyshire. Can you tell me, do you know where a local club is? And it might be a case, well, I don't, but I know that this person's nearby, so they'll be able to tell you where to go. So the social media can be brilliant at doing things like that. And if you can show, it helps if you've got 5-6 Heresy games going on at a club, that's going to be really appealing. But if you can make your games look fun and cool and tell cool stories, again, you can do all those things that you do in person online.
Yes.
And as I say, we've got Giles has started coming to our club. I can't remember exactly how he might have got through the podcast. Back in the day, even 8-9 years ago, we were getting people coming up because of people in our club being active on Warhammer forums and actually going out there and kind of putting the word out and responding as well. That's an important part of it. But actually being open to them coming in. There's so much cool resources out there. It used to be you have to look through the back of Games Workshop or the Warhammer Player Society or whatever to find these people, but it's so easy.
It is a hell of a lot easier now to connect with people, isn't it? That's the one major thing that we've had from all the social media and everything else that's been created off the back of that, is that if you are looking for something now, It is so much easier. I was only thinking the other day that, when you used to have to try and find a really obscure hobby product or something, it took a very long time, and you had to go to trade shows and ask people and go to weird and wonderful shops. And now it's just like, I'll just quickly Google it. Oh yeah, I can get it on Amazon, and then like click, and it's at your door. Whereas in the day that would have been like maybe a month's worth of hunting to find something. Whereas now if you want to connect with people, Facebook groups, Instagram.
Contact.
All the other, like Twitter, it's so easy to get in contact with people.
Contacting a podcast, shouting out your game club, saying our game club's doing this. Anyone nearby or wants to travel, because there is an onus on players. I hear, I put things up saying, oh well, so and so's not that far from you. It would take that'll take me an hour to travel there. It's like, well, I travel 45 minutes to my 35, 40. Sometimes 45 minutes to my local game club, and I've travelled up to southeast London, to Croydon. That's an hour and a bit. If you want to play games and that's your only kind of way to do it, then you kind of have to suck it up or not do it. But often, you can be lucky. I think there's a game club near me where I could virtually walk to it if I needed to. But I don't think I've only been there twice. But and I probably have been to game clubs that are much further away more frequently. But it's just finding that sort of group of people. Yeah.
And it is a lot easier to do nowadays.
Yeah. But we have to be aware that if someone is going to travel a long distance to the game club, try and make sure that they've definitely got a game. Yeah, those kind of things we can do as gamers, to the point of, so and so's pulled out of that game like 2 days beforehand. Okay, Joe, can I put our game on hold because the new guy who we want to get into the game hasn't got a game at the moment, and I want to make sure that he's got an opportunity to play, because if he keeps getting cancelled on or little things like that, that will put people off coming.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I will strongly say don't do, all the things we've done are kind of do's, do this, do that, encourage this, whatever. And this is online, this is on your game club, this is everything. We said right at the start, be positive. Well, the big thing for me is don't demean other game systems. Pointing out the issues of 8th edition or Age of Sigmar or whatever doesn't make your game look better. Now, you can be critical. You can say, I don't appreciate the exploding dice mechanic of like this game where every 6 I roll can keep rolling forever and infinitum. I'm not a fan of that thing. That's not to say it's a bad rule, and it might fit their game perfectly. I'm not a fan of it. That's my own opinion. You can be critical in your opinions, but if you tell me, their models are rubbish, but if that person likes those models, then you're going to be putting them off joining your group. If they think that you're negative as a group, they're not going to want to join your group, and it kind of just puts out the wrong message as well. If you have to put other game systems down to show yours is the best, then yours isn't the best. And we're not necessarily saying that ours is the best, but to say that ours is, but that's what you're doing when you're demeaning other game systems in that way. If you're doing that, then it doesn't show that yours is the best at all. It's kind of it's a bit of a fallacy, and so try not to get into that.
Especially if that's a game system that they currently play or they've come from.
Exactly. If it's a game system they like, you can immediately turn someone off because it feels like a personal attack. If you turn around and say, I hate guys in guns, it's awful, they do this, they do that, they do this. Well, that doesn't. Why waste your time? If you can't sell your game system by saying it's really cool, we've got the best, we've got awesome models, we've got awesome scenarios, we've got all this background, right? You can paint this, you can do this, we've got all these different things you can do. If you can't sell your game system like that, and you have to resort to demeaning other game systems, it makes it look like what you're playing is weak.
Yeah,
it's just bad form as well. We see it a lot in the gaming community. I don't know if it's mainly because we're seeing an online presence and very much that kind of crossover. Gamers, online people, a bit technical savvy compared to maybe the majority of the population. Mm-hmm. But there can be that negative kind of image put across. They're doing this. Oh, the prices. Oh, what have you? And I don't think people really appreciate how that can affect an outside viewer. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're positive, it generates and swells and grows. And you can see that in podcasts. I don't listen to. There are some podcasts out there who pride themselves. I'm not talking heresy, I'm talking generic here. Who pride themselves on their kind of curmudgeon, GW was the best back in the 1994, and what have you. I can tell you that those podcasts who do the best are the ones who are positive. Who are like, okay, cool, yep, critical and positive, yep. There's been some issues with this game, with this company, with whatever, but actually at the moment what they're doing now is really good and blah, 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 and I support this, and yeah, we're going to change this when we do it. It's amazing how that affects the majority of people.
Yeah.
Well, we try that here. I'm not a particularly kind of happy-go-lucky kind of guy, if you were to meet me, but I think I've learned over the years, actually, you get so much more out of what you enjoy by looking at the positives and not ignoring the negatives, but just kind of reducing their effect and overcoming them rather than concentrating on them. And hopefully, we've got the book coming out at some point. We're going to have an interesting time over the next however long. We said it for a number of shows now. Forgive me for repeating it, but there is going to be a challenge in a lot of areas for people who want to play Heresy. And there might be some areas where, you can't play Heresy for a while. Maybe you can still use those Heresy toys in 40k. Yeah, because people might actually, after a while, kind of go, oh, yeah, that's a really awesome army, and then all of a sudden you can turn around and just say, look, try it with me. The Leviathan's good in 40k, the Leviathan's amazing in Heresy,
Yeah.
You've got to, sometimes you've not got an option. But we, as gamers, if you're positive, if you keep pushing it, not pushing it in people's faces, but if you keep flying that flag for Heresy, then I think in the end it will pay off. Now, whether that payoff's one extra player or 8, that's a different story, isn't it?
Yes, indeed, yeah, it is.
But yeah, hopefully there's some good ideas there. If you've got any more, feel free to shout in. If you think we've missed something glaringly obvious, then come and shout us out, I think, because I can't think of anything off the top of my head that we've missed.
No, yeah, if there's anything, just give us an email.
I'm sure there is. Okay, right, we'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll have Michael talking about the Primarchs books. It's been a few shows, but we got Michael back on. Hi, Michael.
Hello.
How you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just one of those things. The show's gone that way, and work and life gets in the way.
Tell me about it.
It's all good. So, we're going to be chatting about Magnus the Red, Master of Prospero, and Perturabo. My mind's gone.
The Hammer of Olympia.
The Hammer of Olympia, there we go. So, the next two for us to look at in the Primarch series.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have finally caught up a little bit. Just to sort of be clear, this is one of the few things that I've decided not to go in on the limited edition. So I'm always a little bit behind everyone else who's been buying those beautiful Primarchs limited editions. But I'm gonna stick to my guns. I'm gonna have them all lined up on the shelf in the normal hardback.
Yeah, I mean it's not like they're terrible, is it?
No, not at all. The temptation is there, and when Horus comes out, something like that, I think I'll be tested, but I'm going to stick to it. But I've caught up. Perturabo came out a little while ago, a few weeks ago now, months ago, maybe something like that, in standard hardback. So we did the first two, a few months ago now, I think.
Yeah.
So Gulliman and Russ. Now it's time for the next two, starting with Magnus.
Absolutely. It's been a while since I read this, but do you want to give us a brief synopsis?
Yeah, likewise, it's been a little while. Let's see if I can remember everything. So essentially, I thought this one was quite interesting because unlike the first two, which were very much throwing you right into the middle of a full-on, Great Crusade conquest, this is a little bit different in that it's the Thousand Sons and the Iron Warriors essentially on a sort of mission of mercy, where they're evacuating the population of a planet called Morningstar, which is sort of tectonically tearing itself apart. So the two Primarchs are there leading their legions in this sort of rescue evacuation mission. But while Perturabo is very much focused on the logistics of things, as you might expect, Magnus is being Magnus and sort of worrying at a question of why is this happening? Like, this isn't normal. So Magnus wants to figure out what's causing these problems with the planet, whereas Perturabo is just thinking, come on, man, let's just get these people safe. And essentially that's the gist of it. So you see Magnus and Perturabo relating to each other on a brother-to-brother level, and then you also see the sort of the leadership of the legions. So Ahriman is there, Forix is there from the Iron Warriors, and you're getting a little bit of the dynamic of those two guys trying to figure out how to get on with each other, because they've not really spent much time between those two legions. And then I think you also get a little bit of this in this of the Thousand Sons still being relatively new to their Primarch and trying to figure Magnus out. So Ahriman, Atharva, Phocis Takar, some of these names that are familiar from the Heresy, they're actually, unlike when you're reading A Thousand Sons, they're not really that sure about Magnus. They don't quite know what he's up to. They don't quite know the limits of his capabilities, and they've not really worked out how to be open about their own capabilities to people from other legions. So they're not really sure if they should reveal all of their secrets to the more grounded Iron Warriors.
Absolutely, and also because of its early Thousand Sons as well, they're not maybe embracing the full power.
No, absolutely.
As well, which is part of that story. I thought the Iron Warriors were... It wasn't my kind of... I was a little bit surprised initially until kind of thought, actually, they're quite a good foil for the Thousand Sons.
Exactly. Like I said, the Thousand Sons are still trying to work out, the extent of their powers and all that sort of stuff. And so having a legion there that are really quite the polar opposite of the Thousand Sons, who are just, let's just get the job done. We know our limitations, we know our strengths. This is what we do. You're absolutely right. They're a really good foil, and I think they work better than any of the other legions might, or most of the other legions might. But it also gives us the chance to see Magnus and Perturabo connecting, and I'm pretty sure this is in the sort of lore that the two of them were good, good friends. That sounds really silly, but they got on really well, and you see them connecting over a sort of shared desire for knowledge, and for, I guess, where Magnus's desire for arcane knowledge sort of overlaps with Perturabo's desire to know how to do things and how to make things.
Yeah, and we've got... I mean, these are books, so these books are designed to show a number of possibilities. So it's either a deep understanding of the character, or it's a specific classic moment in time. So Russ's was the fight with the lion, and Gulliman was about how Gulliman, utilised his forces and what lengths he would go to. This is the test of Magnus's character, and I felt through it that Perturabo is almost kind of the balance against which we, as readers, judge Magnus. And like Perturabo, in the end, kind of is trying to do all the right things. And you end up kind of questioning Magnus a lot through it against Perturabo.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I've seen people comment on this, that they were surprised at how likable Perturabo was. They were surprised that he's the one sort of being the humane character. He's the one really working hard to save these people, whereas Magnus is off buggering off, swanning around on some weird secretive mission. And it actually proves that he was sort of vindicated in the end. Don't want to say too much to spoil what happens, what he finds out. But certainly, he's not just swanning off for no reason. But like you said, Perturabo's sort of like, well, this is really what you should be focusing on. Let's just save these people.
There's a practicality which is always going to be there with the Iron Warriors, and it's save people first, worry about what's going on later. And as you say, we've actually had a number of different views of Perturabo now, and this was very much like the one we saw in the book I always forget the name of.
Angel
Exterminatus. Heaven knows why that is a mental block for me. This is very much that Perturabo, where it's like, yeah, this guy's, he's almost likeable, not quite there, and he's logical, and it makes sense, and you can relate to him. Second half of this little chat, we might talk about a slightly different side of Perturabo.
I think we might.
Yeah, but this was very much, this reinforced the Perturabo I read in Talon and Angel Exterminatus, which made me want to play Iron Warriors.
Yeah.
Which is very
definitely.
Good. But essentially he's there as almost the neutral that we judge Magnus on. And as you say, in the end, Magnus is kind of vindicated in his actions, but it could easily have not been.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the point of this, isn't it? It's all about, like I said, what are these books trying to do? So this one is trying to shed a light on Magnus and show that conflict. Magnus is a really interesting character because, on the one hand, he's arrogant and just so full of hubris, and he's like, dude, come on, stop and think about this. But on the other hand, he's wanting to do the right thing, and he's always trying to be positive and trying to. He thinks he's doing the right thing. He does have good intentions. So that's the point, isn't it? To show that balance between him. You need a character like Perturabo, especially, these are not long novels, so you can't drill into the characters maybe as much as you would do in a 120, 140,000 book, as a word book. So Perturabo provides that foil, provides that balance. And then I thought that sort of then rolled down to the other characters. So I mentioned a few of them. Ahriman, obviously, is in it. Phocis Takar, who people will remember from, I think he was in Thousand Suns. He's certainly in The Crimson King, if you've read that. But also Athava, who at first I thought, oh, goodness, who's this guy? I can't remember who this one is. And I think I'm right in saying that he's one of the Crusader hosts. So he was stuck back on Terra in the Outcast Dead?
Yes, I believe so. Is he the one that breaks out of prison?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So
too many names.
He also has a very particular destiny. If you're up to date with, especially all the short stories and the things which tie into the Crimson King, Athava has a very interesting destiny.
Yes,
but it's nice to get him in here to remind us of him. I don't know about anyone else. I read this before reading the Crimson King, so I found it to be a nice reminder of the Thousand Suns and the character and the sort of feel for stories that feature the Thousand Suns that Graham I think does a really good job of handling. So having Athava in there was a nice reminder. But we're seeing those guys extending their field a little bit, working out really how much of their power they actually can commit to using, how much of it they should when there's someone else in observance. So there's a point where Ahriman and Forix are tentatively bonding and trying to figure each other out. And Ahriman being his usual sort of bluntly arrogant, not really realizing he's being arrogant self.
Yeah.
And something happens and Ahriman lets loose. And Forix is sort of going, hold on a minute. What just happened? What did you do? And I thought that's really quite interesting, where you're seeing someone who's a legionary, presumably has come across psychic powers before, but maybe is a little surprised by quite what the Thousand Sons are up to.
Yeah, and it's quite a good little show of, it's the character of the Thousand Sons as well as Magnus, and it's a little microcosm of what they're going to go through the Heresy, maybe with some different outcomes. But
Definitely.
But you can see through that, like, the issues that are there, and the already kind of where that hubris, where that inquisitiveness, where that kind of confidence is going to lead them in the end. Wasn't necessarily absolutely foretold it would go one way, but it was a path that they were easily led down. Yeah,
definitely. I think there's a lot of foreshadowing, which is certainly what I was hoping to see. But if I remember right, this is set essentially 50 years into the Great Crusades, so they're only a few years into knowing Magnus. So the timelines escape me, but that can't be that long after the whole problems with the flesh change and Magnus's dubious bargain and all that sort of thing. So it's very early on, but we're already starting to see the path they're going down. And obviously with the Thousand Sons, there were all sorts of moments at which they could have taken a divergent path. They were never going to because of Magnus. But there's that will they, won't they sort of tension in there. And I think Graham's done a good job of not over-egging it. I didn't feel like every page was dripping with foretellings of the terrible stuff that was going to happen later. But there was enough to make you feel like, oh, this is powerful, this. If only they knew.
Yeah. That's the thing with a story where you know the ending, and we don't know the ending of this small story, but we know the ending of their big story. The questions are, one of the jobs an author does is show you when things could have changed, where were the opportunities, what did they turn down, what did they accept to get onto this path. I think that's handled well. That's really important. And this is another little show of how you have your arguments, Magnus did nothing wrong or whatever. It's like, Magnus did lots of things wrong. Many of them were quite little, but they just added on to each other the whole time.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's classic Magnus and Ahriman. Yes. Well, all right, that didn't work, so let's try this.
Yeah, or that didn't work because they did it. Sorry, that's it. That didn't work because they did it. When I do it, it will work.
Yeah, absolutely. That wonderful hubris of, well, nothing can possibly go wrong because I'm responsible for this. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and we get to see also, I think because it's not a long story as you mentioned, we get to see Magnus in a variety of forms as well. So we get that questioning kind of the one who's absorbed into that cryptic clues that are out there. We get to see Magnus in his contemplative mode. We get to see Magnus in his rage.
He really lets loose.
Yeah,
he's not a character that we've seen a lot of in his ascendancy. Like sort of intellectual ascendancy, sure, but physically and on the battlefield, so to speak, not really. And there are a couple of moments here where, like you say, he really lets loose. Angry Magnus comes out, and it's pretty cool. I mean, even if you just fancy reading this for some cool psychic powers, you're going to get that. Yeah. There's loads more than that. There's a lot of sort of mystery here. There is some really interesting Iron Warrior stuff. Like I said, I certainly was not expecting that. I liked the fact that it added in. I didn't feel like it detracted from the Thousand Sons-ness of it, but it is very much about the Thousand Sons reflected in and reflecting Magnus.
Yes.
But I also thought it tied in nicely to the Crimson King. So, like I said, I read this first and then moved on to the Crimson King. So, like I said, this is set on a world called Morning Star. And I would maybe this has been covered somewhere in a Forge World book or something like that before. I'm not sure. I hadn't come across Morning Star, but it's referenced in the Crimson King. And there's certainly no requirement to have read one or the other. But I liked the little bits of connective tissue between it that sort of, it's almost like in the Crimson King, things what happened on Morning Star are coming to fruition.
Yeah, and something I think personally Graham's been a little bit guilty of is occasionally overusing either characters or links through, not necessarily that you have to have read them, but that they're always there. And there are a lot of characters in this book, but it doesn't feel like like there's an overuse of them, and it doesn't feel like that foreshadowing is too over the top.
No, I don't think so. I'm pretty sure we talked about this with the Crimson King. I think I'm always relatively easily pleased with this. I don't object too much to there being multiple characters who are linking them all together. I have seen people say the same thing about Magnus and Red, and I think if you're going to complain about one of them, the Crimson King has it a lot more than this does.
Yes, certainly, yeah. And just stressing that is out there. The other thing I have seen was an interesting comment about why is it always that these characters are best friends, so Araman and Forex get on swimmingly. And I think that's a little bit unfair because they're taking this book maybe as a standalone kind of story. When you've got first captains, they're legionaries already, so they have a bond. That is a bond of going through... Yes, they went through different processes, but both of them have been taken as young men or children and gone through a process and what have you. That's going to provide a link. Plus, they're allies. And they're also leaders. So they're going to have to build bonds.
I think that's absolutely right. And I would argue that last comment, they have to build bonds. That's very interesting, that they have a responsibility to get on, to at least be amicable. But I actually think that the whole point of the first scene with Araman and Forex is that they're sort of feeling each other out. They're going, we don't really know each other. Where's our common ground beyond being legionaries? And I think it takes a while. And the point of the relationship between the two of them is that it's burgeoning. They're not instantly best buddies. It's not a bromance. This is them building up towards something that maybe will be. I didn't interpret it as, oh, hang on a minute, why are these guys automatically best mates? I liked the fact that, to me, it felt like they were trying to work out how to build those links, that they had that responsibility to do.
Yeah, I think even if they don't like each other, you see it all the time where people just get on because they know that they're going to have to talk to each other at other points. And there aren't many characters that we meet in the Heresy which are who are the the Erebuses or the what's his name, Eidolon. There aren't many that are like that. So you do think that you could get on with Araman, even in his arrogance. You could get on with Araman enough. Whilst maybe when you turn your back on him going, that bloke, seriously. But you could get on with him enough there anyway, which they'd have to do. They're bred into this way of war. And they're all psycho-conditioned and everything.
And I think if you look back at some of the earlier Heresy books where all of a sudden, especially with the traitors, they're sort of enabled to look at these relationships and go, no, you know what? I was kidding myself. That guy's an idiot. Because the cracks that were forming during the Great Crusade, but they were always brushed under the carpet. Go, no, it's fine. It's fine. Once the first shots had been fired, it freed the legionaries up from the different legions to say, you know what, actually, I never liked him. I was just always pretending, was always telling myself that I was, because that's what I needed to do. I needed to find a way to make this work. And now the gloves are off. I can say, you know what, you just annoyed me too much, or you are a complete idiot, or whatever. I'm trying to not be rude here. I'm trying not to swear too much. But essentially, I think the Heresy then enabled those cracks to really be pulled apart. At the time of the Great Crusade, it was all positivity. And in fact, in this book, probably more than the others in the series so far, I got a real sense of that sort of warmth and positivity about this. If nothing else, they're on a mission of mercy. When do you see that in Warhammer books of any sort? It's almost always the conflict is a war.
Yeah, absolutely.
This becomes a war, but it doesn't begin that, and it begins with the legionaries of the two legions working in tandem to solve a problem, which was interesting in itself.
Yeah, no, really cool. I think we've covered Magnus there.
Yeah, I think inevitably the next book, Perturabo, probably has more to talk about. So should we do the same thing? Should we start with a bit of an intro? So obviously this is the fourth book in the series, and the first by Guy Haley.
Yeah.
I think we know he's doing another one. I'm pretty sure he's talked about how he's doing Mortarion, I think.
Possibly. I can't remember for the life of me.
I'm pretty sure I've heard that. Anyway,
Cool.
This is his first one. I think it's the longest in the series as well, although not by a huge margin. And probably more important of all these sort of statistics I'm giving is it's the first one to be at least partially an origin story.
Yeah.
So none of the three before have been origins, and I think that's great because people were sort of going, why are we now having to go back and tell all these origin stories? Well, we're not necessarily. I like that it's taken us 4 books to get that. But then an origin story for Perturabo is pertinent. Excuse the pun. So what this is doing is this takes Perturabo from immediately after where we see him at the beginning of Age of Exterminatus. If you think back to that, there's a scene where he's climbing up a cliff face.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really know who he is. He doesn't know why he's climbing up this cliff face or how he got to be there. He's just there, and he won't let himself fail. He's belligerent against the universe that he doesn't understand. He doesn't know anything other than, no, you're not going to break me. And then the other interesting thing in Graham's portrayal of him in Age of Exterminatus is the introduction of this idea that he can see this warp anomaly.
Yes.
This thing looking down on him that no one else can see. This sense that he's always being watched, and this sense of sort of slight paranoia that he has. So that happened at the beginning of Age of Exterminatus. And I don't know if there was anything planned at the time, but Guy's done an interesting thing by immediately at the start of this book pick it up from there, when you see the character who is, a very young Perturabo, introduced for the first time to Olympia. He meets the tyrant of, I don't know how to say this, Lokos, one of the city-states in Olympia, and who will become his adopted father. He's introduced to the sort of the politicking of the courts. So that's his origin. We see him growing up in the way that Primarch grows up, in that sort of weird sense, in amongst this intrigue and an adopted family. And we also see him during the Great Crusade, him and his legion, sort of emphasised, I suppose, or personified by Warsmith Dantioch, who readers will be familiar with from various Heresy stories. Dantioch and a very young Iron Warrior called Fortraden, in the midst of this hellish campaign against the Hrud. Now, that in itself is also cool, because the Hrud have only really been referenced here or there in the past. Guy's done an interesting job tackling this very strange species and dealing with how did Warsmith Dantioch get to be that sort of crippled, aged, weird place that he is in. Is it Iron Within?
It might be that
the
one.
Short story. Iron Within, or possibly Iron Without. Can't remember which way around it is, from Rob Sanders. And then obviously we see him in the Imperium Secundus arc, culminating with Pharos. So you get those two strands. You get Perturabo's origin story, and then you get the ongoing campaign against the Hrud, which is categorically not going well.
Yes, that's an understatement. I think it's safe to say we won't see game rules for them for a while.
No, I don't think we should ever. I mean,
exactly.
Read the book to figure out why we're saying this. Yeah, it would be very difficult to represent those guys accurately on a tabletop.
Very.
Short of taking lots of drugs, I think. But you get those two aspects of it, and Perturabo as a character we see most of in his origin bit. You don't see as much of him in the sort of Great Crusade era. That's primarily Dantioch and Fortraden. But you're seeing the ripple effect of Perturabo's youth and how he grew up reflected in how he treats his legion, how they act, even their seniors, like Dantioch, how they act alongside and with the sort of authoritarian, tyrannical, dare I say, character of Perturabo. Now, I said this in my review of this on Track of Words, and I think it's worth saying here, to get out right up front, Perturabo is not a nice man. This is not a book which will make you think, oh, you know what? I have sympathy with him now. Magnus the Red, you sort of finish that book going, oh, I quite like Perturabo there. This book, no. And I'm sure, Greg, I remember you saying somewhere that reading this helped you decide not to do an Iron Warriors army.
Certainly put me off, yeah.
Well, I thought that's an interesting statement, and I hadn't read the book at that point. And then I read the book and went, oh, I completely get it. Because what this does is it gives you an insight into why Perturabo ended up the way he did. What it does not do is give you any sympathy for it.
No. We've had that sympathetic view, which... so when you look on Perturabo at the end, when he's rationalising things, when you see what he's gone through in his crusade life, as it were, and everything else around it, and the fact that he joins the War Master and realises he's made the mistake, right? Those bits in isolation are really hard to take. Kind of, if you thought of your mate being in that situation, that's harsh. That's harsh. What this book does is it takes us on a slightly different viewpoint and basically says it's all his own fault.
Yeah, now, you're absolutely right. And I think, coming back to the thing I was talking about before, about the origin story, what that does is really shows how he put himself in this position. Now, he grows up in Olympia, Olympian society, and I didn't realise this, that before reading the book, that Olympia is not a particularly technologically advanced world.
No.
So he grows up with all this knowledge sort of already in his head, although he gradually accesses it. He's so far above everyone else. He's not a child prodigy. He's what a child prodigy is to a normal child, multiplied by 10, multiplied by 1,000. He's so far above everyone else, and he can't get past that. I think it's so interesting. You see these flashes of him as this sort of Da Vinci-style genius, as this philosophical soul who sees so much and is capable of so much and has the potential to be the best of all of them. But he's got this chip on his shoulder. And I wonder if the sort of the warp anomaly looking down on him is supposed to maybe represent that, or sort of represent this sort of sense of paranoia he has, that he can never really prove himself 100%. But also, I'm not sure he ever really wants to, because he feels like he's superior to everyone.
Yeah. So he's much like a lot of these Primarchs who fall on these kind of planets. He's utilised as a tool, by a tyrant, and he knows. And he fights against it, but never quite enough. He sits there like that self-brooding, I deserve this kind of thing. This is how I'm going to live. I'm going to go upstairs and listen to some Radiohead, which never worked for me. Always made me happy. But yeah, he wallows in that self-pity. It's almost how he identifies himself.
Absolutely. And self-pity is not a word phrase I had previously applied to Primarchs.
No.
Maybe to Kurz at times. The whole point at which he makes his end, he's wallowing at that point.
Yeah, Perturabo had a little bit of, oh, woe is me, I can never build anything. There was a little bit of that. But this takes it to another level. And when the key thing is, again, Magnus was given opportunities through his book and through other books as well. There are lots of opportunities here for Perturabo, and so as he goes through, in the end, we see the taking of the planet as well, and it actually goes on to have what do you call it when he went back to Olympia? Was there a name?
The raising of Olympia.
It was possibly called the raising of Olympia. We actually see a bit of that, and it was that point where he lost me. Because up until then, you're like, okay, you're in this situation, these things happen, and a stranger and blah. There were moments with that philosophical debate where I was like, again, you're missing the point here. And then it was the raising where it was like, well, this is your chance to be more than you want to be or seem to be.
Yeah, to rise above and take the high ground.
And at that point, he took the option, which was possibly the least, the worst option in my eyes of wanting to like a Primarch.
Yeah, and he had a moment of redemption being open to him as well.
Yeah.
Without a spoiler, that's inevitable. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
That he can't take it, and the whole. I think the defining thing about Perturabo, beyond the self-pity and the paranoia and all this stuff, is the stubbornness, the pig-headedness, that he can't bring himself, even when he accepts he's wrong, even when he fundamentally understands what he's done, he still can't bring himself to make the change, to make the decision, to be humble and find a way to make things right. He essentially, and this is in the lore, we'll come to why the raising of Olympia happens in a minute, but he rages against this. He's so embarrassed about the fact that where he was brought up has reneged against its promises, and wants to. Some of them want to split from the Imperium. That he's thrown his toys out the pram. He's gone, no, this is what I'm going to do. At the head, he goes, the Emperor, my father, will never forgive me for this. He could then have made a choice. Well, there was a choice. He could have gone, so I will submit myself for censure.
Yep.
But he doesn't.
Wow.
And that's the interesting thing, because even though he knows categorically, and he reflects in the book about the first meeting with the Emperor and that moment of thinking, at last, I fit in, I have my place, I have my purpose. But he never really did, or he never really accepted his place. He always felt that he was better. So he has this stubbornness, this feeling that he deserves more. Now, you might think, hearing us talk about this, it just sounds like a petulant teenager. Well, in some respects he does, but it's more complex than that.
Yeah.
I think people will label him as, he's the petulant one, or whatever. Fine. If you need to apply a label to this, do it. But it is more complex than that. Guy is a complex author. He's trying to tell a really interesting, really complicated, complex story with a lot of strands to it. I think he did a really good job. And I also think the justification, that's not the right word, the explanation of why Perturabo chose to do what he did when Olympia's sort of mistake was made clear was really interesting, because he's in the middle of this campaign against the Herd. He knows it's wrong. He knows he's thrown his legion away. He knows what it's doing to him and his legion. But he won't stop. He won't go, this isn't the right thing to do. Everything is telling me to stop, but I'm going to prove that I'm the hardest working. I'm going to prove that I'm the most loyal, whatever. It's the point at which he's embarrassed by where he's come from. That's the point that makes him stop. It's not acceptance. It's, like you say, it's rage, it's anger. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And there's huge questions still left in that. It's not like everything's explained. Was there any choice in the way he acted? Was that the way he was created? Is that, as you say, some form of, is being able to see the maelstrom? Is that an aspect of being touched by chaos as he's transported through? We don't really know, and we don't want to know. That would ruin a lot of it. But as you say, it sounds on the outside like, okay, it's a very simple matter of fact kind of book that, he's petulant and blah, blah, blah. But if that was the case, then the raising of Olympia wouldn't have hit so hard.
I agree.
And that was the point, that it was like, much like when Horus takes the blade off of Erebus. Right, or sort of when Erebus gets away, there was a chance to stop that, and you're like, that was the moment. Well, that seemed to be Perturabo's moment, and there are lots of things going on around it. For a short book, there's some really good there's plenty of space in there to explore that. But as you say, we end up with a guy you can attribute, some hyper mental issues to, and some very base, almost teenage feelings to as well. and that kind of mix. And as you say, it's just he never seems to want more than he's kind of accepted, and it's almost self-destructive.
I think it is.
Yeah,
I think self-destructive is a good term for it.
It's really interesting where that comes from, because yes, had a horrible kind of interesting horrible upbringing, but he could have done something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And his upbringing, on the one hand, he is completely used. He's manipulated as a tool by the tyrant of Lokos. But with one hand, the tyrant is manipulating. With the other hand, he's offering an olive branch. Always. Perturabo can't see past the one to accept the other.
Yeah.
And that becomes very interesting. And there's some really interesting stuff about how he reacts to the court, to his adopted father, his adopted family. And then some of that comes back to where he returns to Olympia, the moments before the raising and the moments at the very end of it. And I won't spoil anything, but there are some particularly good parts where he's confronted by not quite the ghosts of his past, but elements of his past. I thought that was done really nicely. Now our conversation about this has been quite interesting, because on the one hand we've been saying, this is really painting him in a specific light. But on the other hand, we've been very positive about it. This is a damn good book. But I would say personally, this is a very much personal thing. It was the first book of these four that I found at times difficult to read. And I don't mean because it was poorly written or anything like that, because it was so bleak and so unexpected that I thought, you know what, actually this is making me stop and go, I need to have a break from this. It is very different. I think this is very different to your usual Black Library fare. I think guys stretched the remit to a very interesting place. I'm not sure I would want too many books like this.
No, again, it's a short book. It's relentless in its bleakness. There's no kind of very little hope in this book, and that's probably quite fair in a style attributed to the Iron Warriors as well. But, true. It was, as you say, an interesting book, and I think when you take it with Angel Exterminatus and you take it with Talon particularly, you get a much wider picture of who Perturabo may have been, because even when he makes his good decisions now in Angel Exterminatus and Talon, I'm now seeing a slightly different viewpoint over why he's done it. And where before it was like, that's quite noble, like now that still might be noble, but I'm viewing it through this tainted screen of, self-worth and self-interest that maybe I didn't before.
That's very true. I think that's a very pertinent point.
And if that's all if that was all you got out of that book, then actually that really adds to the Horus Heresy series. And that shows, I think, where these books are really good. When you read Guilliman's book and then you put that into context with how does he fight back against an enemy who has no morals, has no compunction to use anything, right? How does Guilliman fight back? When you push that onto this one, say Russ's one was very much a singular kind of event, although it had some really good character assets in there as well. These really kind of put other instances into perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think in the interest of fairness that I didn't enjoy absolutely everything in this. The bleakness and what have you notwithstanding, I think Guy's done an excellent job. There are a couple of points where I thought it was a little bit on the nose. There was a little bit of the slightly too blunt. He's in his Da Vinci-esque workshops. Yeah. Maybe that's a little bit of my Terry Pratchett fandom coming in. That in Terry Pratchett, I can accept Leonard of Quirm being very Da Vinci-esque because he's called Leonard of Quirm.
It's a parody.
He is the Discworld Leonardo da Vinci. Perturabo should not be. There were moments where I thought, it's a little bit too close to that. And there was a moment where he essentially uses the Plato a philosophical concept espoused by Plato pretty much verbatim. And it's very appropriate to the conversation that's going on, but it was also a little bit too real world, I thought.
Okay, yep.
I am familiar with this concept and this sort of thought experiment, and it wasn't. I didn't feel like it was 40k. I didn't feel like it was adapted quite enough. But I'm being mega nitpicky here.
Yeah, and I think if you aren't familiar with Plato's works, like I'm not as familiar, then that's going to. I understand what you mean in it being real worldy, but the kind of nature, it jogs you out when you recognise something.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I said this is a very personal sort of criticism. And if Guy hears this, I'm sure he will take that in the sense it's meant. I don't think overall it detracts from the book. I just thought there were a couple of interesting things where he did a really good job of contextualising what Perturabo's doing and how he relates to the word, how he sort of interacts and fits with his with the people in the court. I was about to say peers. Peers isn't the right word either, because he doesn't have any peers. And that was difficult. I think the whole book was probably quite tricky to get the balance right. I think you said before, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of different arcs. Taking in taking in Dantioch was a brave choice.
Yeah,
because that's a very well-liked, well-known character, perhaps coming from the left field, but people seem to have responded to him very well, and essentially giving his background of how he got from A to B in amongst Perturabo and the really complex things going on there. That's a good balancing act that I think Guy has achieved overall.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered Perturabo there as well.
Yeah, if we talk too much, we'll end up giving spoilers. Yeah, so let's avoid that.
I think we've worked quite a talent for talking a lot about books without giving too much away. But yeah, I think these two have built on the two that came before. I mean, I loved Russ, obviously influenced a little bit by Russ, but then I loved the Lion in Russ as well. So I think that might still be my favourite, whilst Perturabo was maybe the most kind of interesting. And the series from this point, I mean, I've read Lorgar at this point, which I won't talk about at all, but the series is looking good and interesting and relevant, which is always, it needs to be relevant to be part of the Horace, although it's not part of the main series, it's still part of that setting and fits in with that, which is really good. So yeah, brilliant. And we're going to wait until, so we got Lorgar is obviously out in special edition, and Fulgrim's confirmed after that.
Fulgrim is October, I think, in special edition.
Okay, so it's going to be a while before we come back to this, because we'll have to wait till Fulgrim comes out in regular edition. But again, it'll be really interesting to see where they take Fulgrim.
I agree.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to those both.
Yeah, definitely. And then I'm sure we'll talk, or certainly you'll talk in due course about what comes next. I think we know Ferris Manus is the next one after Fulgrim.
I believe so, yeah.
David Guymer. There's a cover been revealed of that and everything. You can find that online. I've not heard anything about what's next. Rumours of people doing bits and pieces. Like I say, I'm pretty sure Guy has said he's doing Mortarion.
Yeah. And I'd say we'll get through to Fulgrim, by the end of the year in regular edition. And by that point, we'll have been to the Black Library Weekender, so I'm pretty sure we'll have the next couple at least.
Yeah,
confirmed,
that's very true.
If not just chatted about. So we'll have an idea of what's coming from there. But we're 4 down already. Fulgrim, it won't be long. Lorgar, I say I've already read it, so it's not going to be long till I'm 6 down. That's a third of the Primarchs.
That's scary, that, isn't it?
It's time's flying.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, that's the story of the Heresy at the moment, isn't it? The pace is quite ferocious. Yeah,
it's quite good getting the. So I picked up Talon the other day, read it all, so I only had to read the afterword. I've read that one. Brilliant. Put that on the shelf.
You didn't fancy going back and rereading it all as a piece?
Not yet. I've already talked to you. I've got to read Chris Wright's Inquisition book yet, whichever one that's called. Not Carrion Throne, the other one, is it?
Yeah, Chris is the Carrion Throne.
Oh, Chris is the Carrion Throne, yeah. Getting them the wrong way round. Sorry, yeah, no, I've read Chris's. I've got to read John's.
John's.
Sorry, yeah. The Heresian Wars book.
Resurrection.
And, as this is released, the ebook of the Black Legion will be available as well. So they're kind of on the list, and I'm halfway through an Age of Sigmar shorts book, and it adds up and adds up. So
it does. Tell me about it. It's a good problem to have, though.
Yeah, it could be a lot worse. Awesome. Well, cheers, Michael. And we'll see you again soon. No
Great.
doubt.
Look forward to it.
Diamond. Well, that's another show survived. Nice, but hopefully breaking it up like we're doing is working for people. Fingers crossed, trying to keep the shows a bit more concise, not trying to jam them full of too much, as I think that can hurt sometimes the topic when we do that. I really enjoyed the chat with Michael, so hopefully people enjoy that one as well. And if you've got any more feedback, so more how-tos, tell us what you think of them, tell us where you go wrong, if you've got some feedback, some additions to add on, or some things you think we've misrepresented or just plain wrong on, then send us some feedback on that. That would be really good. And they can send that to greg@theimperialtruth.com.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to get in touch with me, just email me at neil@theimperialtruth.com.
Yeah, absolutely. That goes for anything to do with the website. There's just a show and stuff. Yeah, we welcome it all. Do read it all. We usually reply in the end. Sometimes get a little bit lost in the system in terms of when I read it and stuff, but do try a reply. We've got also, if you are listening via iTunes and you would like to leave a review, that would be wonderful. We've had a couple recently. Thank you to those guys. Really, really cool. Feel free to leave those reviews there because it does. I think they're changing slightly the metrics on iTunes, but an up-to-date review shows that people are still enjoying it rather than a review that's a year old where people might be dubious anymore. So that's really helpful and cool. So thank you if you do that. Neil, do you want to shout out your Twitters?
Yeah, so if you want to follow me on Twitter, I am @NeilPaints, and I'm @NeilPaints on Twitter and Instagram.
Awesome. Are you going to post a picture of Corax up?
Yeah, one day I will. Yeah, one day I surely will.
What do you mean one day? I thought you were going to post more.
Yeah, I'm very much behind on my Instagram and Twitter, and I think I just need to. Get my head down really and try and get a few. I think once I've completed Corax, because I've only got a few bits left to do on him, I think that might give me a bit of a boost to get some pictures up of him and then start working on some new projects. And I might do what I did last time and have like several things on the go at once, so I can keep posting up regular things every day, rather than I find it gets a bit tedious if you just go and this week I painted a fingernail. It just gets a little bit sort of dull.
Yeah, maybe, but it's not like we've seen any real photos of it. So, hey ho. But it's all good fun. And obviously, we've got Child of Fang or Imperial_Truth as well. Forgive that pinging in the background. If you are interested, Fanatic Podcast is up and running. There will be more shows coming, trying to get people sorted on that. Sometimes a little bit tricky, but we will be there and talking all kinds of other stuff, hobby. So particularly with things like Necromunda coming out, we can do that, which is really cool. And After Eleanor as well. Hopefully we'll be getting the next episode of that out. So if you haven't listened to After Eleanor, book review, Horus Heresy podcast, and David Witek and I go through them all. So give that a listen if you are vaguely interested in that. Where are we going to see you? So we've done the open day now. It's only a few weeks away from First Blood, Malrain First Blood, which is looking to be a small but interesting event with some cool people coming, which looking forward to. and you're not attending that one.
No, I'm not. No,
you got your painting course coming up. Has that happened yet?
Yeah, I will be going to the one at Alpha Games. So Richard Gray's masterclass. That's in September. That's in Alpha Games, so I'll be going to that, and just be nice to go to. I don't think I've ever actually been to a painting lesson since I was probably about like 12 years old. So it'd be interesting to delve into that, and that's really my next thing in the calendar.
Yeah, that's cool. And Blood and Glory tickets are on sale for those who may have forgotten to purchase them. They've started to sell. And got some cool people been talking to who are looking to come up from that. If you've seen some of the people on the 30k channel, some of them hopefully are coming up. And talking of the 30k channel, around the release date of this, you will find yours truly having played a game. So when I was talking over the last month about finishing my Mechanicum off, it was to go and take onto TV. Now, they're not fully... I haven't got transfers on them, but I don't want too many transfers on my Mechanicum anyway. I like them quite plain in that respect. But I went on there with Dan Como, who's been on the show yonks ago, and good mate of mine. We had a cracking 3,000 point Sons of Horus versus Mechanicum army face-off with mainly infantry, which was really cool to do something a bit different. And that was an experience. It's a very different medium, and I think it took both of us quite a little bit of time to settle in. So I think maybe the start of the video, when we're actually playing the game, we might be quite stilted, quite like a matter of fact, and only start to really get into it later on. It's strange, because having done the podcasting, maybe I should be a little bit better at it, but I felt kind of like this isn't my expertise.
Was it the fact? Was there a camera in your face? Was that what was putting you off?
For most of it, not. So for people who haven't seen the 30k channel, there's a bit of kind of intro and what's in your list and stuff, and there's a bit of camera time there. And then most of the game is not focused on the players. It's focused on we go like phase by phase, like this happens, this happens, this happened. And the way that David likes to do is try and tell a story. So you're talking about the Thanatar rather than my Thanatar, rather than I chose to shoot this. It's very much trying to maintain the storytelling, which is really cool without kind of doing that. And it's just very different, and even more so for like kind of a little bit not too bad when talking about some of it because of the podcast being used to that, but very different medium. Really interesting. Something I haven't done before. And I've talked on camera before, directly at camera, and that is almost better in a way because it's a bit more focused, but seeing the way he works, it's very kind of cool to see behind the scenes now, because obviously every time I watch a video now, I'm like, all right, yeah, cool, I can see where they are and what they're doing and what else is going on around. And David's done a cracking job. And I believe, though, I'm trying to remember exactly, it might be that it goes up. David releases, I'm pretty sure it does actually. So David has a paid for channel on YouTube as well. So he puts stuff up there, which then later becomes available. And it doesn't cost much to subscribe, but, obviously buying camera, renting space, all that takes a lot of money. I can appreciate that. A lot more than podcasting does. So he has a paid-for channel on that. And if you are interested, go and have a look. Go and check out the 30k channel anyway. We had him on. He was brilliant talking about it when he was on. But, yeah, yours truly is on there making an idiot of himself and getting some rules wrong. Standard.
That's the way to do it.
Well, I do have, and listeners of the show will know that I do have a nasty habit of saying the wrong word and carrying on because I think, I'll call Alpha Legion, Raven Guard a lot of the time or whatever, or vice versa, and not realise I've said it. Or I'll say Strength 10 when I know I mean Strength 8, things like that. And I'm like, well, I know what I meant. So hopefully David didn't have to do too much editing on our behalf because of that. But yeah, that was a really good experience. So I urge you go and check the channel out anyway. And if you want to, you can go and check out our game. All the links will be reposted. Once it's up, it'll be on the Facebook, the Twitter, I'll be sharing it. Because, it was cool. Well, I might watch it first and see how much of an idiot I look. Especially in front of the camera. The makeup lady must have had the day off because she wasn't there, so I do look awful, as usual. But
Excellent.
yeah, it certainly made me think, maybe I don't want to do, gaming battle raps that are really good quality. A lot of effort involved from David. We just turned up and played a game for a few hours. Really cool. So yeah, wanted to get that in there, and that's about it. I think we've done pretty much everything.
Yeah, I think so.
So don't forget Element Games codes. Go and see Miles and let him know we sent you. There's so much cool stuff. Did you see the pack of skulls? That
I did
releasing
actually.
now? Probably should have mentioned
I don't think it's about time they did a pack of skulls.
Yes, it is about time. And the vines as well. Suddenly you can make a simple base, just have a little bit of something about it by bending those vines around.
It made a lot of old things look quite cool and new as well, doesn't it? Because you could get some old terrain and put those all over it and make it look a particular, like being abandoned and all this sort of stuff. So you can really do some cool stuff with those vines.
And if you've got some pillars or something like that, have a few vines crawling up them, and there's some really cool things you can do, and hopefully they bring out more products like that enter the line. But go and do that. Element Games, awesome. I think we're done. So if you haven't got anything else to add, Neil?
No, nothing from me.
Brilliant stuff. We'll see you again soon. You have been listening to The Imperial Truth.